Good evening, and welcome to Dominica's Electoral Reform virtual rally. This is a program brought to you by the Electoral Reform of Dominica, the Electoral Reform Coalition of Dominica. So we want to welcome you in. If you're listening to us on Q95 Radio, a pleasant good evening to you. I am Simone Matthew, and this evening we are here for the virtual rally. If you had an opportunity, hopefully you were able to join in on the prayers that were going on Q95 this morning. But this evening, we are going to be joined by members of the Electoral Reform Coalition, and they're going to tell us, they're going to give us some updates of what they've been working on with regards to the electoral reform process. As we know, the 6th of December, Tuesday, is going to be the snap elections in Dominica. And we're also here to invite you to make a donation. You know, there's a huge rally in Lago on Monday, tomorrow evening, and we want to ensure as many people as possible are able to make it to that particular rally. So we want to invite you to make a donation, make a contribution so that we can bring in busloads of people. I see we have Mr. Zah Emmanuel with us. Unfortunately, he is very dark. We cannot see you, Zah. So I'm not sure if you can change your location so that we will be better able to see you. So I will give you a minute to rectify that. But guys, come on in, share the live, let everyone know that we are here. We are expecting a few members of the Electoral Reform Coalition to join us this evening. And as you know, the Electoral Electoral Reform Coalition is made up of the Opposition United Workers Party, the Freedom Party, NJAM, Civic Vibes, Concerned Citizens Movement, the Walkers, the Wednesday Walkers, and I also want to say Pastor Rodney's Church, Grace and Fellowship is also a part of this movement. So come on in as we get ready for an update. Let's see how Zah is doing with his lighting. Nope, still no lighting on Zah's part. So come on in, share the live, let everyone know that we're here. We're here to engage you this evening. We want to know what is on your mind as we get ready for the general elections on December 6th. On Tuesday. So what's on your mind? What are your thoughts? Do you think that it was the right move for the opposition to remain absent from the election? What are your thoughts on the independent candidates? What are your thoughts on the snap elections in general? So we invite you to come on in to be a part of this conversation. If you're listening to us on Q95, just a reminder, there will be no phone calls. We won't be able to accept your phone calls, but we invite you to join the conversation on Facebook and YouTube. So on Facebook, we're on Q95 FM radio, as well as Push Past 10. On YouTube, we are also on Q95 Radio FM, as well as Push Past 10. We may also go live, I believe, on Civic Vibes, on National Joint Action Movements page. So we're going to be live in several areas, as well as the TDN network. We will be live on TDN as well. So we're trying to channel our efforts into every corner of Dominica as we bring you this conversation. So as we get ready, let us go ahead and take in some music as we await our panel. So stay right there. Don't forget to share the live, Let everyone know that we are here, and we are here for the virtual rally of the Electoral Reform Commission. So let's enjoy some music as we await our panel to join us.
Every head of government to the earth is armed and dangerous. Armed, dangerous. Babylon armed, surround and dangerous. Government armed, dangerous. It's the power them harm, surround and dangerous. Superpower armed and ready. Midget and IMX missile aiming deadly. Well, from the north to the south and the east to the west. Then getting ready for rush shoot out on this. They wanna see who's the best. Dangerous. It's the government arm, surround and dangerous. Devil them armed, dangerous. Superpower them armed, surround and dangerous. Military demonstration, my gosh. Every runner army just a rehearse invasion. Well, war marching to murder population. Chaos and fear, the world intention. System invasion. So dangerous. A superpower them harm, surround and dangerous. Government's armed, dangerous. Look out, devil them armed, surround and dangerous. Well, yeah. hoping and praying for things to get better. But Rasta now, it a go get worse. So much worse. Signs of their times are getting clearer. Are the Lord, and this mountain is getting nearer. Nearer every day. Things are go crucial. Down in a Babylon, yeah. Things are go brutal now. Dog a go down, dog. Things are go brutal. Down in a Babylon, yeah. Things are go crucial now, now, now. Lord, Lord, crucial, crucial, yeah. Ropampa, crucial, crucial, yeah. One, been on wailing and more tribulation. Threats and more fears and rumors of war. World food shortage and mass starvation. Man and man hurted to destruction. Semi never warrior. Things are go brutal. Down in a Babylon, yeah. Things are go crucial now. So much crime and violence. Things are go brutal. Down in a Babylon, yeah. Things are go brutal now, now, now. Lord, Lord, crucial, crucial, yeah. Oh, crucial, 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 yeah. Crucial, crucial, yeah. Crucial, crucial, yeah. What do you know? Things that get tougher. Hoping and praying for things to get better. But Rasta know it a gonna get worse. And so much worse. Signs of third times are getting nearer. Father Lord, and this majesty getting nearer. Clearer every day. Things are go crucial. Down in a Babylon, yeah. Things are go crucial now. Dog a go down there. Things are go crucial. Down in a Babylon, yeah. Things are go crucial now, now. Looking out my window, and I'm a thinking of tomorrow, and I'm a wondering what the future will be. Thinking of the children who are the victims of oppression, beaten down by wars and eaten up by starvation. I'm saying, when there's ugly will be over, and the children can go out and play. I wanna see when all oppression will be done, and the people will rise up and say, freedom at last, freedom at last, so free, freedom has come, freedom has come.
Yes, so we are here for the Electoral Reform Coalition virtual rally, and we want to thank everyone who's joining us so far. Again, if you're listening to us on Q95 FM radio and you want to be a part of the conversation, don't forget that we are live on Q95 FM radio on Facebook as well as on YouTube, and as well Push Past 10 on Facebook and YouTube, PUSHPAST10 on YouTube and on Facebook. So we say pleasant good evening to Dorian Dorival, Dave Bertrand out there in the UK. Pleasure, great to see you on late out there in the UK. Marshall, always wonderful to have you on. In Claire, Miranda Charles, Owen Prosper says, good evening, patriotic family, the host and the panel. I'm locked as usual. Thank you, Owen, for being here. Didi Esther, thank you for being here as always. Dorian said, now is the time to fight this evil from our backs and from the leadership of our beautiful country, Dominica. So I want to share a quick clip with you as we're still awaiting our panel. You know, guys, let's have a little bit of patience because, as you know, these guys have been running themselves to the ground. I think they had several meetings today. They also had a program on Q95 to invite everyone to share their prayers for this beautiful country of ours. So let's give them a couple more minutes as they make their way into the program for our virtual rally. So while we're still here waiting, let us go ahead and share the live. Let everyone know that we are here. Let's give those who are listening on the radio an opportunity to come on over to Facebook and YouTube so you too can be a part of the conversation. But let us take a listen at what we are fighting for, because I think we're all familiar with the story at this point, the promised electoral reform that we have not received. So let's take a listen as a reminder.
That will be held at the soonest possible time. I want for the year 2023 to begin with a fresh mandate given to a fresh labor team to commence the work of building post-COVID Dominica. With this in mind, today I wrote to His Excellency the President and advised he dissolves the current parliament of this country effective immediately. I have asked that a fresh writ be issued on Monday, 7th November 2022 for the holding of general elections in the Commonwealth of Dominica. The Dominica Labour Party will reveal its new look slate of candidates in Roseau on Tuesday, November 8th. Nomination day in Dominica shall be Friday, the 18th of November, 2022.
Yes, so that was what we heard from the Prime Minister, but this is what I want us to take a listen to, just in case we are forgetting what we are fighting for. Let us take a listen to when the Prime Minister promised that there would be electoral reform within the first 100 days of his administration. And I see that Thompson is coming in. So let's cancel that for just a minute and let's invite Dr. Fontaine. Dr. Fontaine, how are you? We can hear you, but we cannot see you.
All right, and there's a reason why you can see me. I'm driving, so there's no way I can.
Okay. Well, that is absolutely fine. We know that you have been on the go for several days right now, and we truly appreciate that you're taking time out to be a part of the Electoral Reform Coalition virtual rally. We have a nice audience here on the Facebook Live, and we're inviting more people to come on in. But are there any updates you can provide for us, Dr. Fontaine, with regards to the work of the Electoral Reform Coalition at this time?
Yes, sure. Basically, our major focus right now is for this huge rally that has been planned tomorrow. Basically, we're calling all Dominicans who are against what is going on with regards to the sham elections and who support the call for electoral reform. We're calling on them to show up tomorrow from 6 o'clock in Lagon. That will be our major event before this election cycle. And the plan is to really have a huge rally and candlelight vigil in Lagon, Roseau, Dominica. And we're inviting Dominicans from all over Dominica to descend on Roseau in the numbers. What we really need is a powerful show of numbers. We want to send a very strong message to the government of Dominica that the people of Dominica are serious about electoral reform. And that's the best way we believe that we can get it, is to have as many persons as possible show up on the bay, not the bayfront, but rather in Lagon tomorrow from 6 o'clock.
Yes, and speaking of which, Dr. Fontaine, we know that the observers are also here. So are you trying to send a message to them as well?
Yes, in fact, we had some very good discussions today. In fact, yesterday we met with the observers from the Commonwealth Secretariat, and today we met with those from the OAS and from CARICOM. And it's been very interesting engagement. I know there are a number of persons who thought we should not engage them because they have been there time and time again before, and nothing seems to be happening. But I had a slightly different take on it. I believe that engaging them is the way to go. In fact, today we had a very interesting discussion with the head of the OAS delegation, who is no less than the former Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Christy Perry. And it was very interesting in that we were able to really, because one of the things they were asking us is why. They wanted to get from us why we were boycotting the elections and what we hope to gain out of it. And I provided us with an opportunity really to do just that, to explain to them why we were boycotting, and also the reason why we believe that it was the best thing to do. So, the idea that we can keep engaging those individuals and those professionals is very important. Yesterday, before in our discussions with the Commonwealth observers, a very high-ranking delegation again. It was headed by the former Foreign Minister of Tanzania, a very powerful woman from Tanzania. And we were able to explain to them exactly, where we're coming from, the issues that we're having, and why we wanted to talk about, electoral reform and why it was important to us. So I believe that the engagement so far has been extremely useful, and we can only keep engaging. We can
Yeah,
only.
yeah. Now, Dr. Fontaine, did you have an opportunity as well to also inform them that many of the recommendations that some of these observers have put forward have not come to fruition, and that we're going into another election process without the recommendations that some of them even proposed? Did you have that conversation with them?
Yes, we did. We had a very frank and honest conversation, and that formed a part of it. In fact, we told them very clearly that a number of our constituents were not happy that we were even engaging them for that very same reason, that they've made very good recommendations in the past, and none of those recommendations have been implemented. So the approach that I adopted today, both with the OS and with the Commonwealth, I said, okay, well, what you need to do, and I advised them. I said, you've always been making recommendations to the government of Dominica, and they've not been implementing those recommendations. What you now need to do, and what we are asking of you to do, is to make recommendations to the OAS and to the Commonwealth Secretariat. And the recommendations that I would recommend that you make is, one, declare Dominica a pariah state, and secondly, to expel Dominica from those organizations. I said it's only when you begin to take those type of measures that the government will believe that you're serious, because quite frankly, they're not respecting your authority. They're not listening to what you're saying. But if you go this extra step and make a recommendation to them, that is what it is, because I explained to them, and the reason I told them why they should do that is because Dominica is not behaving like a member of the Commonwealth, is not behaving like a member of the OAS. I explained to them the fact that there were 8 members of the United Workers' Party, including myself, that are facing charges of treason or incitement, and our cases have been dragged before the courts, that the only interest this government has is to jail the opposition and to embroil us in these long court processes. And also they're not interested in democracy. And I said, on those 2 grounds, that is sufficient grounds to make those recommendations. So let us get some teeth in your recommendations, not to the government of Dominica, whom we know are going to ignore your recommendations, but to your organizations.
And what was their response to this?
Well, their response was that they don't believe that the organizations can interfere. I said, this is not interference. What you are in fact doing, you are simply saying, well, unless you get your act together, you cannot belong to us as institutions. And that's all that is. It's not a matter of interfering. It's saying that we have certain measures, we have certain standards that we adhere to within those organizations. And if you're not willing to abide by those standards, then you need to go off on your own. And when you have cleaned your house, you come back. This is not interfering. This is the way you're going to get some action.
Right, right.
So
And Dr. Fontaine, we have Za Emmanuel with us. So let's try to add him to the conversation. Oops, I think he just disappeared. So Za, if you're listening, please try to join us one more time. Yes, Dr. Fontaine, you were saying?
yeah, so I'm saying that, for me, it was very important to send this very clear message to them. And I'm hoping that we'll see some action.
Yeah. Now, outside of the observers, is there anything else that the Reform Coalition is engaged in right now?
Well, today we had our day. We announced the day of prayer, and just carried live for most of the day on Q95. Thanks to Q and his management, Mr. Gregoire, for allowing us to do that. And I think, for us, it's a question of adopting every single approach. We're praying to God. We are marching. We are protesting. We are doing what is necessary. Obviously, we don't have much time. Elections are scheduled for Tuesday, just 2 days away. So that's what we can continue to do. We can continue to engage Dominicans. We can continue to make our case rather, for electoral reform. And that is what we intend to do even beyond December 6th. As far as I'm concerned, the elections are not going to happen. I might say they're not going to happen. To us, it is not happening. To us, it is not and void, in the sense that we should not recognize the results of those elections. And that is what we're advocating. And that's what I also asked the observers to do. I said, recommend to your institutions and to the governments that you report to that they should not recognize this government. These are the kind of messages that you need to send. And I can't for the life of me understand why they're not willing to do those things, because that is how you're going to elicit some measure of response from this government that has just ignored them for so long. So, the important thing that I find, at least for me, in all of this, is that our interventions have not been useless. I think we're able to engage them and take it to another level. Let's just stop focusing on the government. What can you do as institutions that can help us? And I think that's where we need to begin to put additional pressure. And one of the suggestions that came out as well today was from the former prime minister of the Bahamas, who suggested that it's important that they remain engaged even beyond December 6th, that the institutions remain engaged with the government of Dominica. And I think that is something that we have to really continue to pursue. So beyond December 6th, we'll be writing to CARICOM, to the OAS, to the Commonwealth, asking that they have persons, follow through on what is going on, follow through the recommendations of Sir Byron, follow through with what is going on in the parliament, because bear in mind, as a main opposition, we will not be in parliament for the next several years. So we need, those institutions to be looking out for us, and that's what we can continue to push on our part.
Yeah, and speaking of which, Dr. Fontaine, I mean, what is the concern that there will pretty much be no opposition in Parliament if this election does go through? What are your concerns that now that the sitting party will most likely have 21 seats? Do you have some concerns with regards to Parliament?
Actually, none at all, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I do not have a concern about Parliament, for a very simple reason. The government of Dominica has reduced Parliament to just a a house of cards, really, because we have three parliamentary sessions a year on average. When we mentioned that to the observers, they were stunned. They could not understand it. And they were saying, is it that you have it 3 days each time you meet? He said, no, 3 times on average, probably 1 or 2 days max. So we may have 6 or 9 days of parliamentary proceedings for the entire year. So in effect, we're not missing anything. We're not missing anything. And I just want to, at this point, just recognize individuals who have safe seats like Daniel Luge, Hector Sparks John, Honorable Lennox Linton, who had very safe seats and who sacrificed those safe seats. In the process, they've sacrificed a salary, they've sacrificed a livelihood to make a point on electoral reform. But that is what it is all about. Is that fact that our people are ready to sacrifice, because at the end of the day, when you have only 3 sessions of parliament, what does that tell you? There's not much that can be done. The government is not interested in making laws. It's not interested in crafting new laws. It's not interested in the business of state as it is, as it were. And from those 3 sessions a year, typically one is the short one is the budget, during the budget time when the budget is presented in July. The second one usually is for some bloated supplemental spending, and the third one is anything that comes up in between. So there is not much going on in terms of parliament. So I don't think there's anything that we are missing per se. The legislation for the electoral reform that has to come before parliament, we've already seen it. It has been approved by the Electoral Commission. There's consensus on it in the Electoral Commission. We have also seen it and have given our suggestions. So unless there is some radical change from the side of the government, we should be able to enact those reforms without too much problems. So besides that, of what use is there been in parliament?
Yeah, and I certainly see your point, Dr. Fontaine. But I think we can also recall that one of the reasons we found out about the missing billions was through the presentation of Mr. Lennox Linton at Parliament. So I'm just wondering if there are certain things that we will be kept in the dark on now that the opposition party will not be in Parliament.
Well, all of that can be done through a people's parliament. There are different ways and means of getting this message out. We did not discover it necessarily within the parliament. We discovered it through our own work and so on. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to work on, and people need to understand that as an opposition, we'll continue to work in the interest of the people of Dominica. And when we discover things like the missing millions, we will present that to the Dominican public. There are different ways of doing it. So rest assured that we will continue to do.
Okay, Mr. Ito is here with us, so let me add him to the conversation. Bernard, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thank you very much, Simone. I'm good. How are you?
Yes. So let me just remind everyone, including our listeners on Q95 Radio, that you're tuned in to the Electoral Reform Coalition, Dominica's Electoral Reform Coalition virtual rally. And if you would like to make a contribution to the conversation, you can join us on Facebook and YouTube at Q95 FM Radio, both Facebook and YouTube, and PUSHPAST10 push past 10 on Facebook and YouTube. So Bernard, Dr. Fontaine was just giving us some updates with regards to the meeting with the observers and the work of the Electoral Reform Coalition. Is there anything you would like to add?
Well, I'm sure Thompson provided a comprehensive update, but as he's probably mentioned, we met with the observers here. We made it clear that we look towards them to help the cause of democracy, global democracy. And in Dominica's case, pursuing global democracy in Dominica is very important. We had some interesting conversations with them. We told them that we think that we welcome them, although some of our supporters was saying, we should not meet with them and so forth, that this validates a sham election. But we are courteous people, and we also know that building those relationships and looking at folks directly in the eye and making our arguments is useful. And so we chose to meet with them. And but we did make the point that sometimes the obvious things that one looks for, like stuffing of ballot boxes, moving of ballot boxes in the dead of the night, and that sort of thing, the sort of obvious things that would imply some level of cheating, some level of problems with the voting process, that those obvious things are only the tip of the iceberg, and that we do not expect to see those things. That is not where our fight lies. Or fight lies with the undemocratic way in which people are bribed and treated, with the way that voters are flown in weeks in advance, days in advance. We have a problem with the sort of economic tyranny that folks are threatened to lose their job if they do not comply or vote the right way. In fact, we saw some video earlier today on social media confirming that sort of behavior. And so these are the things that we ask the commissions and the various observer groups to pay attention to. And we invited them to that we could show, we could escort them, we could give them a deeper insight, a deeper X-ray into the problem, and that that is really what this fight is about. And that their methodology of only looking at the obvious things, not only could it not help the cause of democracy, it could actually harm the cause of democracy. Because if you certify that everything looked good, all the lines were straight, all the people were well behaved, no one was fighting in the streets and shooting at the polling booths, and then you said it looked very nice and very peaceful, good election, then that itself is a misrepresentation of the reality by only looking at the superficial aspects of the election. So that is what the gist of what we had with both groups. We met with both the Commonwealth observers as well as the OAS. And we made clear that we look to them to do the right things. We also made the point that they have made recommendations over the years, and those have not been implemented. And we look to them to take some accountability, to ask for those recommendations to be implemented, and to note that the government has not implemented those policies. And we understand that they cannot interfere in sovereign affairs, but we certainly expect them to have some professional accountability and ask that what is the status with their recommendations, and to note or to grade or to give some sort of grade to the country in terms of not following the directives of those reports. And so we were very direct with them on those requests, and that is where we left the conversation. So in my opinion, they were able to digest that and absorb that. And let us hope that it resonates in their hearts when they do their deliberations and their observations, and especially when they prepare the final reports.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And of course, it's a virtual rally, so we want to make sure that we're engaging with our audience and we're taking their questions and their concerns. So we will do so in just a minute. But we also want to remind everyone of the important rally in Dominica tomorrow, Monday, December 5th. In Lagos, and we are seeking donations. So we want to encourage you to go on over to NIDCLF. And if you're on Facebook and YouTube, the website is posting right there. You can simply click on it. So that is www.N as in Nancy, I as in India, D as in David, C as in Charlie, L, F as in Frank, NIDCLF.org, that you can make your donation, because we want to bring busloads into Lagos tomorrow. So Bernard, just kind of tell us about the rally tomorrow. What can we expect tomorrow?
Yes, the rally tomorrow is the sort of culmination of many things that we have been working over the past several weeks. What we want to do is bring together all the concerned patriots of Dominica, all of the good people who stand up for justice, who want to see a better country. We want to bring them together in one spot, in one voice, in one unified voice. It will be a candlelight vigil at various points in the night. In the evening, we will ask our participants to show their candles or light up their phones to sort of symbolize the dawning of a new day in Dominica, or the washing away, if you will, of the darkness in Dominica. And so we have a nice lineup of participants, good speakers. And we will be making the pitch to the Dominican people that we are in the days, finally in Dominica, of living under an illegitimate government. Illegitimate in the sense not that the prime minister does not have the right to call a snap election, but illegitimate in the sense of it no longer appears, and in fact it is so, that this government reflects the will and the values, the vision, and the ideas of the Dominican people, of the majority of the Dominican people. If you have an election process that is so flawed, so convoluted, so distorted, grotesquely distorted, it simply cannot function as the mechanism to bring the true will and ideas of the Dominican people forward. You cannot, through this distorted piece of machinery that is now our electoral system, have an outcome that in any way reflects the true will and intent of the Dominican people. And the legitimacy of a government rests upon the acceptance of the people that the government is legitimate, has legitimately reflects their will and their input. And if you do not have this, then in all forms and in all realistic situations and in the theory of political science, you now have an illegitimate government. And that's where we are.
Yeah,
And
and I want
that's
to come back.
the message we want to convey on Monday for our various speakers and talk about the path forward. We do not view December 6th as the end, but the beginning of a move to shine light on this legitimate government and to press for fresh elections under a reformed electoral system before the end of this illegitimate term that this government is embarking upon.
Yeah, and I want to come back to you and Dr. Fontaine to talk about what happens after December 6th. But before we do, I just want to go ahead and share this particular clip where the Prime Minister said during his last term, the beginning of his last term, that within the first 100 days, there would have been electoral reform.
For some time now, and certainly during this campaign, the issue of electoral reform has been a vexed one. Having reflected on this issue, it is my intention to invite a renowned Caribbean jurist to lead a national commission on electoral reform. The work of that commission, added to all the previous consultancy and election reports from various international organizations, together with the decision of the courts, will inform the shape of Dominica's electoral reform. Public hearings will be held throughout the country, and all Dominicans will be able to appear before the commission and give their views. Provision will be made for anonymous submissions, as well as for an open discussion forum on social media sites. These, my dear friends, constitute the priority agenda of the first 100 days of the new administration of the Dominica Labour Party.
Yeah, so I think this is what a lot of Dominicans found especially vexing. Were you guys able to hear the clip? Yes, Thompson, you're muted.
Yes,
Yeah,
we're
so you can unmute your mic. So I think that is what people found especially vexing, to use his own words, that the impression was given that there would not be another elections without electoral reform. And I think, part of the problem is as well, we're seeing this lack of access to the media. And it is just very concerning that, like I always say, he who controls the media controls the narrative. So for example, here on Push Percent, and I can speak for Q95 as well, we have had all the political parties represented. We've had labor rights, freedom rights, UWPites, APP, TUD. We have everyone, because that is what democracy is about, giving an equal playing field to all the parties that are involved in the political process. But yet we see that on the majority of the radio stations in Dominica, the opposition voice is not welcome. So kind of speak to us about what can we expect beyond December 6th. But before we do, keep your thoughts on that. Let's engage our audience, because this, after all, is a virtual rally, and we certainly want to hear their thoughts. So Marcel says, no reform, no election, no independent candidate. Do not legitimize this illegal election. And of course, I shared the website to make your donations, www.nidclf.org, to make those donations for the rally tomorrow. Greg Baptist says, looking for a real doctor to fix the economy. Well, here is he. Big up, Dr. Dave Bertrand. Great to see you. Please take note of this question. After the vigil, which was today, what? Penny Shirley, I'm watching and listening. Very good program. Thank you, Penny. Marshall says, why would they ask such question when they know what's happening? Owen Prosper, absolutely no reform, no election should be the talk of the day and week ahead. Sandra Norris, good evening to you. She says, good evening. Marley, good evening. Claire, good evening. Bernard Eli says, I enjoy your program. I support electoral reform, but the electoral reform didn't prevent UWP wins the previous general elections. I live in the US and I'm a registered voter in Atlanta. I have voted several elections, never asked to present voter ID. Not sure about that, Bernard, because I live in Atlanta too, and I always present an ID when I go to vote. So I'm not sure where in Atlanta you are doing so, but let's read his comment. I live in the US. I am a registered voter in Atlanta. I have voted several elections, never asked to present voter ID card. All they ask, state ID. Yeah, some sort of ID, right? To see I'm a registered voter on the list. Just a few thousands in Dominica show up in the polls, and the USA millions. Why is it a problem in Dominica? So let's pause right here so you
Yes,
guys can have an opportunity to provide
absolutely.
your comments.
Yes, Simon, and I want to jump on this very quickly because that's a question that also came up with the observers. And the question was, well, you're such a small country, surely everybody knows everybody else, right? Why do you really need an ID? And my response to that was quite simple. Persons who are coming into vote typically are away for 20, 25, 30 years. So if you have a young person as your agent at the polling station, they will not know these individuals. Okay, it's not like these are individuals who are living in the community on a daily basis. Yeah, if you're in Grand Forks, for example, and people who live there, you will at some point know everybody because it's a small village. Okay, but if you have somebody who left Grand Forks 30 years ago, there's a good chance that the majority of people now living in Grand Forks would not know that person. Okay, so when somebody comes in and claims to be Jane Doe or whoever that person is, there is no way they can know that. Okay, and that is where it opens up for fraud, and that's the reason why you have the voter IDs in the United States. That's the reason why no other Commonwealth country allows voting without some type of identification. Okay, and that's for that very simple reason. So it's not the question of the smallness of our countries, is a problem of the number of people coming in. And secondly, we never had this issue prior to 2009. That issue really started in earnest in 2009, because up to 2009, even if the list was bloated at that time, but the people who voted, the persons who determined the future of Dominica, were by and large those living in Dominica. All of that has been turned on its head by virtue of the fact that individuals are now brought in by the thousands by one party to overturn the will of those living in Dominica. So it changes everything, and that's the reason why we need reform.
Bernard, your thoughts?
Well, I mirror those thoughts. I mean, certainly, we are civilized people, and this is the 21st century, and we are a small country. And the fact that we're a small country doesn't negate the need for those ideas. It means the ability to get those ideas prepared is a trivial task, really. And so we should do the right thing, as Thompson said, identifying voters and making sure that they are legitimate voters. And further, I would say we need to look at how we can keep those ideas current, tie that into the 5-year visitation system and the 3-month accumulative residency, and have a system in this day and age where we have modern technology and all sort of fancy cards and chip cards and so on, make the technology relevant so that all of those issues can be tracked with that card. When was the last time you visited? How long have you been continually accumulated those times? And we can do these things. These are trivial matters to be done. This is a small country with 40,000 voters and so on. This, in terms of database and in terms of big data and data mining, this is almost an insignificant amount of people to be done. It could be done by a professional team within a week. And so those things simply need to be done. Those things will make our governments legitimate, will make the elections valid. And as we said, there is no reason, and again, why should we be the one rogue nation in the Commonwealth states that does not do this? It is best practice, it is accepted practice. There is no reason for it not to be done. There's no practical reason either, or technical reason. The government pushed through electronic passports, which is a more complicated endeavor, within a few months. And so what is it that is truly at the base of not getting on with the task of getting the voters ID? Clearly, this current government has an invested interest in not having those card issues, in not having those lists clean. And it is those psychological hurdles that are much higher to climb than any technical or logistic burden. And so we completely reject the notion that somehow it's a difficult thing to do or somehow it's an unnecessary thing to do. It's necessary and it's easy to do. But the psychological hurdle to give up your advantage that you have carefully crafted over 20 years is the real problem here.
Let's go back and take some more comments. Analia, John Lawrence, let's see. We educating, we focus on votes. I think we're focused on both of them. Analia, Susan George is watching. Irvin Charles, they're not going to get 21 seats. Marigot, Salisbury, and possibly the Kalinago are going independent for sure. Thank you for expressing your opinion, Irvin. Albert Gabriel, if this goes through, no grants, no loans from the World Bank or from the EU should be given to the illegal government. Greg Baptist, the so-called election observers that they send here is legitimized. Lose it sham election. You are not welcome in Dominica. Well, everybody's welcome in Dominica, so let's not say so. Marshall observers cannot say the people got the government they deserve. What will they say this time? Desmond Green, tell them again and again. Colson Shillingford, great to see you. Francis, great to see you. Inclair, great to see you. Marvin, Sheldon, Boland, I am concerned that a much stronger push was not made to have genuine independent candidates drop out of the elections. Isn't their participation simply legitimizing the fraudulent elections? Marcel, agree 100%. Patsy, can't take another year of scared civil disobedience. Mark, Dominic, good night, guys. Great job informing people. Nept Packet, great program, guys. Good night to the hosts, my esteemed leader, Dr. Fontaine, and the leader of the Freedom Party, Mr. Bernard Ito. Leavers, there should have a strong push to prevent that election from taking place, especially in the presence of the observers, to send a clear message that the process of elections is fraudulent. Hi, Julie Polidor, Peter Thomas, good to see you guys. So your comments on that, and then let's talk about what happens after December 6th.
Yeah, just to say that the important thing is not so much the independence. The story of Tuesday, December 6th is not that 14 independents participated. The story of Tuesday, December 6th is that the major opposition parties did not participate in Dominica. And that is unheard of. You know, the only case that I could find in the corner of Caribbean happened in Jamaica in the 1970s. So most people living today have never seen that before. You see, so that in itself is very telling. And I think, and that has brought a lot of, I can tell you, there is tremendous interest in the stance taken by the opposition. We have been fielding calls all week from people as far away as Jamaica and the Bahamas and Trinidad and all through the Caribbean, wondering what is going on in Dominica. So I don't think that the presence of independent individuals validates by any way this election. It does not. To the contrary, what people are going to be talking about is that the main parties did not take part in this election. And that, to me, fundamentally will be the script for what happens on December 6th. And that says everything. And as I said, I talked about the sacrifice that has been made by persons who have sure seats, and the sacrifice that they're making even now to not be a part of this process, but to send a clear message to the government that we need electoral reform. And that's the kind of sacrifice that I'm proud of. That's the kind of sacrifice that makes me extremely proud to be the leader of the United Workers' Party, where you see members prepared to step up without fear, and say, yeah, I'm prepared to take it. Take whatever heat I'm going to take financially and otherwise for the sake of the party and for the sake of democracy in Dominica. That to me is commendable. And these are the real stories of December 6th.
Bernard?
I totally agree with that. We are standing on principle. We are saying that the integrity of the process matters, that what we model to young people and our children and those who look up to us to be responsible leaders is we must model responsible ethical behavior. And if we truly believe that this process is flawed, we would be doing a disservice to ourselves, to our constituents, and to and those young people in Dominica to participate and to validate a flawed process. And so we must take a stance on principle and said we will no longer participate in a flawed process. We will no longer play on your rigged board. We will move over here to a new board with some new rules, fair rules that we have developed and asked for and brought into legislation and deal with it that way. So we are simply not validating this process. It is a flawed process. It is not a process that will lead to any outcomes that are reasonable for any opposition party in Dominica. It's a hopeless process, and so that's where we stand on the issue. Now you ask what's next after December 6th.
Yes.
December 6th to us is just a blip on the screen. We do not even pay much attention to December 6th. We have decided as an organization, as a coalition, that December 6th is not an important date in our Commonwealth at this point in time. It is called an election. Mr. Skerritt has called his election to cleanse and to renew new faces for his government, but that has nothing to do with the Dominican people and nor to do with the opposition parties. So December 6th is not a very important date to us. What happens after December 6th is what we're focused on. As I said earlier, we are looking at an illegitimate government. We want to make sure that every Dominican understands post-December 6th, whatever the outcome is, and he'll win the majority of the seats. But we want every Dominican to be clear. We are now living under an illegitimate government for the first time in Dominica's history, a government that does not reflect the will of the Dominican people at all. And we will continue to make that message to every man, woman, and child in Dominica. We will make it clear that we need to get back to legitimacy in our land under a reform, and that can only occur when we have fresh elections under a reformed election system, and we expect those elections sooner rather than later. We're calling on fresh elections within the next 2 years. Under the reforms that were promised by Mr. Skerritt, promised and worked upon very hard by Mr. Honorable Dennis Byron, Sir Dennis Byron, and that is what is the only thing that will restore a sense of legitimacy on our island, and we do not believe that our island can tolerate and stand and survive 5 years of an illegitimate government. And so that is the mission. That is the real work to be done. December 6th is the beginning, not the end. To make the case to Dominicans that we need to restore legitimacy in our island, it's time the good guys, the good people of Dominica stand forth and say, we will define our nation. This is our moment to redefine our nation, and that's what we will be doing in December 6th, redefining our nation, redefining what legitimacy is, and fighting to restore the legitimacy in our island through fresh elections. And we'll do whatever it takes. We're not violent people. We're not advocating that. We do not wish to be branded hooligans and the true enemies of democracy, but within the law of persuasion of ideas, of massive demonstrations to show the government that we, the Dominican people, the majority of us, do not accept living under an illegitimate government. And that is the fight, a civil rights movement that we will embark upon in the next few years and months and years.
Yes, thank you for that. And we want to invite Claudia Sanford to the program. If you can unmute your mic, Dr. Fontaine, I will come to you in just a minute. But Claudia Sanford is now joining us. And again, if you're listening to us on Q95, you're listening to Dominica's Electoral Reform Coalition virtual rally. It is primarily being held on Facebook and YouTube, on Q95 FM radio, as well as Push Past 10, if you would like to be a part of the conversation. So, Mr. Sanford, any contributions you want to make to the conversation this evening? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, hi, good night. Good night to your listeners. Mr. Fontaine, good night, and Mr. Ito, good night. It's a pleasure to be with you all. There's so much to say, in this chapter of our democracy in Dominica with this election, that it's sometimes it's much better to sit back and watch events unfold. For example, in the Salive constituency where I am, we have seen some very interesting events over the last week. We had we had the Labour Party visiting the constituency twice in a week. They came on last Sunday and they came back last night in the Kalinago territory. And they are hunting the ghost of UWP. And in doing so, they are actually speaking out all the evidence that the observers need to realize the election is a rigged system in Dominica. The entire electoral system is rigged. And it took them to realize that and for Dominicans to see that in the words they say after the action taken by the opposition parties in Dominica. And last night, I heard Honorable Kelly Grant who made some statements which is very intimidating and fear-mongering of the people, admitting to the fact that they really have the system rigged. When he said that they have spies all about and they will be watching you, and basically telling people that they know where they will vote and they know how they vote. And I think in this Salibia constituency where we have an independent candidate who made her case for contesting the election, and we understand her position as well. And in a democracy, even if as an opposition force or coalition you take a position, individuals still has a right under the constitution to express their political will. And we see the independent people, doing that in this election. So while we understand the position of the coalition in not contesting, I think it's a good position to expose what is wrong about our electoral system. You cannot take away the independence and the liberty of people to contest in a democracy. So even in the Kalinago territory where we have this independent candidate, Ms. Myrtle Avil, who stepped forward and challenge Mr. Skerrit and tell you, hey, we're not going to have you have a complete dictatorship in our country. The Kalinago people and the Atkinson people are going to unite together and fight this, and we're going to come forward with the best we have and challenge you to the end. And that has been working well for her. And we have Mr. Grant who came last night and he said that they're looking. And I think it's supposed to signal to the rest of Dominica that the election is already rigged. If a past parliamentarian 2 times who won the Kalinago seat, and also he claimed to be a senior member of the Dominica Labour Party, will tell you that they have spies everywhere, one can conclude that they have people working as returning officers and all these people in the electoral system that run the electoral process, working as spies for them. That is what I got out of that. And any candidate in an election should be able to write to the Electoral Commission tomorrow morning based on that statement and said, hey, listen, we are not trusting any of the returning officers, the presiding officers, the vote clerks, and these people in these polling stations. They have hidden agendas based on the statement of Mr. Kelly Grano. And if he is speaking on behalf of the Labour Party, then we could say that this statement is endorsed by the Prime Minister of Dominica. And as such, I don't think coming out of this statement by Mr. Grano that should be any elections on Monday. The entire process based on his utterances is already, messed up. It is rigged and it is spoiled. So this is where we are in the Kalinago territory, and this is what I will say as an introduction now to as we go along in the discussion, and I will come in later on as we go along.
Yes, thank you very much, Claudius. Dr. Fontaine, you want to come in?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, I have seen this very disturbing video. We've drawn it to the attention of the observers in today. In fact, I was able to talk to it. And people might think, but really, how can they say that and people believe it? Our Dominican populace or electorate, they're not very sophisticated. Mm-hmm. So if somebody tells them, hey, I know where you're going to vote, they believe them. And I remember that very same situation in 2014 when I took part. That was the same thing. They will tell them, we will know. Because, in 2014, we were telling people were advocating to them, okay, just take the money that they're giving you because it belongs to you and vote them out. Mm-hmm. And then they started to say, no, you cannot do that because as long as you take this money, we know who you are and we know where you vote. And people listen might say, but how is that even possible? Well, let me tell you how, and some of what they have used. What the individuals are instructed to do is that they're instructed to put the X, sometimes not necessarily in the middle of the box, but put it on the shoe, like, because you're allowed. It's a good ballot as well if you put the X on the box, on the shoe. So from the time they see those ballots coming back, they know it. But what is more frightening to me, and I saw it in my recount in 2014, is that they actually leave the store. Okay, so when you go to vote, right? There is the clerk or whoever it is looks down the list of names, and they see, well, you have a unique number. So the number for me is let's say A 1005. Okay, so that number is known. That's my number assigned to me. I'm given a ballot that says A 1005 attached to the ballot I'm voting with. I take this into the polling booth. I put in my X. When I come out, the person receiving this is supposed to be struck off. Sorry, let me. I got it mixed up there a little bit, because you put the ballot directly into the box. So before you get the ballot, okay, before you get this ballot, they're supposed to strip it off, to cut it off, right? And then give you this stripped off ballot that you go into the box, you sign, and then you put it into the box. We found several ballots with those stubs attached to it, several of them. And we pointed that out to the clerk. We said, how comes these things are still there? But later on, we understood that the reason why they were still there, because that was the way they could identify if the person that said they voted Labour really voted Labour. That is the extent to which these people have been going in the past years, and they're prepared to go. So when Grano tells you, hey, we'll know where you voted, exactly what they're talking about. It's not an idle threat. And the poor person, wanting to get something from the government, later on, they're going to say, boy, I have no choice but to vote them. And that's what we're trying to explain to the observers today. That is coercion, that is intimidation, and that on itself should disqualify this whole election. And the other point that I made very, 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 very strongly, and when in defending why we boycotted this election, I said, but the court system is stacked against us. We have done the hard work. Our party has. Our candidates have gone through the list. They have noted who has been away more than 5 years. They have noted who are dead. They present those lists to the electoral office. The electoral office simply set those lists aside. They never look at them. They never consider them. We then go through the petition process, which is we're required to do if we want to lodge a complaint. The petition process, we lodge this in as evidence, and then these courts have summarily dismissed all of those petitions without even looking at it. The only saving grace we've had in the past 3 years was that last year, when it got a chance to go before the Supreme Court, because according to our constitutional law, our laws there, the appeals goes as far as the OECS court. When the Supreme Court judges had a chance to say, when they said, okay, what's going on in Dominica? Let us take a closer look at all of that's going on. They reprimanded the judge. They said the judge should know that these are very serious allegations being made, and they've had a chance to view the evidence. And on the strength of what they've seen, these should have been considered by the judge of first instance. It was not done. This is in the report of the CCJ. Okay, so we've gotten a bad deal, and I tried to explain to them today why it is that judges do that thing against us, against the opposition, because they're appointed by the government. They're promoted on the behalf, on the request of the Prime Minister, and they will do everything to maintain that. And that is what we have. So people say, well, why don't you contest and then just challenge? We've done that before. And even when the evidence has been clear, crystal clear, we're not even given a hearing in the court. And that is why, thankfully, the CCJ has intervened. So people say it's not just us making things up. the CCJ, these esteemed judges, in their own judgment, in their own considered judgment now, have seen what we have been saying over all those years, that our system is corrupt, it is tainted, and no government winning an election like this should be allowed to hold office. None.
Yes, yes. Let me come to you, Claudius, because I think one of the arguments we hear is that the UWP won under the same system. So why are we complaining now about this particular electoral system and the request for electoral reform? So what are your thoughts on that? Because that is an argument I hear all the time, that the UWP won under the same system. So why is it a problem now?
Well, I think people who would make that argument are superficial in the way they look at the maturity of a democracy. Any young developing democracy has to go through the process of upliftment and what we call restructuring, along the way. So even if the argument that UWP won under this may sound good in making the opposition look bad for calling for electoral reform, but just for the idea of a democracy to grow and develop, into something that is mature and up to standard in the current space or the current context of time, just the year as it goes by, there has to be restructuring and reform to bring it up to that level. Back in the days, we did not have the kind of technology that you have now with the access to the telephones and pictures, and where you can take pictures of your vote and send to people and all that stuff. Back in the days, the national radio station was what it was, the national radio station. Right now, the national radio station is the Labour Party radio station, and that has been eroded over time. So this systematic erosion of the institution by this current regime necessitates that our democracy be rehauled and remodeled and restructured, and that's why reform is necessary. For example, in days gone by, because of the access to each and every one, people knew everybody. With the CBI and the Citizen by Investment program, you do not know who holds a Dominican passport. So somebody can come in with a Dominican passport and claim to vote. And because of the rigged system, the corrupt system, and as if you go along with what Mr. Grano is saying, they have spies in there. The people working at this police station can know, okay, this guy is illegitimate, because they inform them that when this guy come in, to allow him to vote. But with a reform program, with an update and a modified system, you would have the re-registration of voters, you would have the voter ID card. So these little tricks of rigging the system would be eliminated, and you would have a more mature, fair democracy where the people are the one which decides by the power of their vote, as we call it in the theory of public choice. Is by the power of that vote you choose your government. And when you choose your government under the Westminster system, you have a majority that will take the decisions on behalf of the people. When the system is rigged and the democracy is not mature, you have a few individuals, through their manner of deceit and deception and bribery and all the ills that goes with a really poor democracy, making decisions on behalf of the people. So the people have to live with the consequences of decisions that a few people made by manipulating the system. And that is not good for economic development. That is not good for social development. That is not good for the humanity part of or the moral part of it, if you want to use that term, of a country. And these are the deep understanding of the reform process that we Dominicans have to understand. It cannot be that, oh well, only win under that system while we fighting it. This is really the lowest of arguments. This is almost illiterate arguments at this point from my perspective. There are deeper consequences for having people choose a fair government through a fair and free process, and doing so they can live with the consequence of their inactions or bad decisions, and they can say, okay, we put you there, you didn't do too well, we made a mistake, we can correct it with a fair system in the next election. But when you have a system that is rigged and is underdeveloped, you could have a few people repeating over and over being in government and keep making the mistakes, and the people who doesn't have a choice in that system have to live with the consequences of that. And that is where it gets really uncomfortable and nasty in my view, in the context of political elections.
Dr. Fontaine, I think you wanted to jump in on that question. You're
Yeah,
muted.
absolutely. And bear in mind, when the United Workers' Party assumed office in 1995, in 1995, Dominicans were the one voting. The occasional person would probably come down and vote, but there was no systematic attempt to look at where people were voting in the different constituencies and bring persons in. That really started in earnest in 2009. All right, so to try to compare what was going on during the time of United Workers' Party in 1995 and now, that is night and day, completely different scenario altogether. What we're against that is happening now is just the targeting of constituencies, the targeted victories that we're seeing, where the government brings in individuals in the hundreds, like they did in Casibros, in La Plaine, in Grand Fort, and so on, to with the sole purpose of changing the vote. And that's what I took time yesterday, for example, to explain that to them. I says, listen, to the observer, I says, you have an average of 2,000 persons per constituency in Dominica. In 2014, for example, the United Workers' Party lost by a combined 610 votes. 610 votes. That's what we lost by in 2014. Okay? Because you have very close constituencies that is decided. For example, in my case, I was declared the victor the night of the election. The following day, I was told I lost by 2 votes. So you have these differences that are just so close. So it's a loss by 10 votes in St. Joseph, a loss by 100 in La Plaine, or, very small numbers that can easily be influenced with the influx of voters. So to try to compare what is happening now, this widespread bribery and treating by a government that is using the CBI resources for the most part to charter planes. I'm told they spent $35 million in the last election. 35 million US dollars. The observers could not believe it. They could not believe that in the country of 70,000 people, that $45 million goes into an election campaign, US dollars. But that is the extent to which this government is prepared to go to retain itself in office. And we are saying that to make the comparison with what went on during the United Workers' Party time, it's just not there. You cannot make that comparison. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah, I think we lost Thompson for a couple of minutes, but let's go back and engage our audience, because again, we are here for the virtual rally of the Dominica Electoral Reform Coalition, and we want to make sure that we're engaging our audience. Let's see if Dr. Fontaine is back with us. Are you back, Dr. Fontaine?
Yes, I'm back. Yes, sorry. Yeah, I'm using my phone, and unfortunately, calls are coming each time, and that's what the interruption is. But I was making the point that, to try to compare these two periods, there is just no comparison, really, because what we see now is just beyond the pale in terms of the efforts that have been used to bring people in. And in 1995, there was no time to effect electoral reform. There was just, 4.5 years of United Workers' Party. But this government has been in place for 20 years, and they have more than enough time to do the reforms that we have been seeking.
Now, we just had Zed Lloyd jump in on the conversation, so we want to welcome him. But before we do, let us make sure that we are engaging our audience. If you're joining us on Q95 FM radio, don't forget you can jump on YouTube or Facebook and be a part of the conversation. So Julietta Austri says, good night, panelists. I do agree with Bernard that we want reform. The only reason why Scary does not want to implement is because he has ulterior motives, and that is to steal election results. Delima Wilson out there in Trinidad, our neighbor, thank you for being here and thank you for joining the conversation. Dave Bertrand, the opposition forces should make their voices heard outside the polling stations on December 6th. Interesting thought. Stephanie John Baptist, hi, good evening. Dorian, we don't want reform. We need reform for Dominica to move forward for a better future for our children and our children's children. Marvin says, I love the position the Reform Coalition is taking. Thank you for that, Bernard. Greg Baptist, Prime Minister Skerrit is the subject of investigation of the U.S. government for money laundering and passport of criminals. The guy is desperate, so that is Greg's views, not ours. Marshall, and recommendations made by OAS, CARICOM Commonwealth, and CCJ Opinion. Let's take someone we haven't heard from. NEPT, the Labour Party has a well-oiled machinery that manipulates the electoral process at different levels. I experienced this in the Grand Bay during the 2019 general elections, because it kind of begs the question, with all this going on, you know, what trickery do we not know about? I think once Claudia started describing what goes on election day, it kind of just popped into my mind that there might be things that are going on that we will never know about in terms of bribing the elections. Lambert Charles, great to see you, Lambie. He says, good evening, lady and gentlemen. Julietta Nep Packet, I don't view the situation in Dominica as a simple one. There is a tyranny and evil spirit hovering over Dominica, and as such, the people have been blinded. So guys, thank you so much for your comments. Jerry Nelson over on YouTube. Blessed night to everyone. We need reform. The voting list needs to be cleaned up. Thank you for that. Let's see who else we have. Mark Dominic, please. Let's make every possible effort. Didi Esther said UWP won the election in 1995 under the same system is false. There is a difference between UWP participation in an election without comprehensive electoral reform, winning fair and square, and the blatant rigged elections. Thank you for that. Peter Thomas, just to add to what Dr. Fountain said, I know a young lady that said to me last night that her name is on the list to come to vote on December 6th. She never voted in Dominica. And speaking of which, someone also sent me a picture that they are listed as a registered voter in Dominica. She's been away for 30 years. She said she has never registered to vote in Dominica. So that speaks about the small communities, people knowing everybody and simply adding names to the electoral list. And I'm talking about firsthand experience. So this is not alleged. This is someone sending me a WhatsApp message with a picture of she and all her siblings listed on the electoral list. And she said, as far as she knows, her siblings have never registered to vote in Dominica. They've all been gone for 30 years. And she herself personally knows that she has never registered to vote in Dominica. So I think, you know,
Simon,
the possibilities are just endless.
Is it possible to get this information? Because that's the kind of documentary evidence that we need to present.
Well, you know, she's a very private person, so I would have to seek permission from her first,
Okay.
because her name is right there on the list with her siblings.
Simon, as I said earlier, right?
Yes.
Remember, I started with what Kelly Grano said, that they have spies everywhere, right? Now, I take that to mean that these guys have a total control and manipulation of the electoral office, the institution that runs the election in the country. These guys have infiltrated there, because that's the only way a returning officer could register someone like in the incident you're speaking to, who is not living here, and allow it to go through to the point where their name appears on the electoral list. Mm-hmm. Now, your name is on the electoral list. Someone comes in and they identify as you know, Claudia Sanford, in, say, Roseau Central, right? Your agents will object, but the person still go ahead and vote, and the vote counts. Then you go to the legal aspect, which is after the fact, after the election, and you can query that there, but the government has already won, and the judicial system will totally ignore any appeal of that sort. Because even criminal cases, right? There are criminal cases that goes on for 10, 15 years, 6 years, 7 years, and never see the daylight in the court system. So it's not just it's not just trick. It's a systematic cancer that has overtaken the country, including some of our major democratic institutions. In this case, as you can see with the example you gave, in this case, it's in the electoral office. It's agents and people, professionals working in the electoral office facilitating this. And this is backed up by the judiciary, by the judicial system, because when you come to those cases after the election, they never see the daylight in the courts. So I mean, when you get into the depth of how this corruption, how this rigged system operates, you have to dig really, really deep to understand it. The ordinary person on the street will not understand how the depth of that rigging, and that is why you have people like Tony Astafans, and we'll talk about the legacy of winning. These guys understand that, and they will do everything to fight electoral reform, and Mr. Skerritt understands that well. And I have taken a position as of this election that the 6 people who won in the seat without contest, I will not be referring to them as honorable, because this is not an honorable position. So in my deliberations here tonight, you'll hear me use it to Mr. Skerritt, because that is what it is. He was not honored by the people of his constituency because nobody voted for him, right? So these guys understand how the system works, and they will fight it. And if there's anybody in Dominica who still denies that, the evidence is right before you. Why didn't he just go ahead with the reform? And if you ask yourself that question, and the answer is because he knows he can only win without reform, and he will do it 2 years into a term with 18 seats. That doesn't make sense to the ordinary person. And you see that in their campaigns. You know, their crowds are very small, the energy is low, they feel deflated, they speak to ghosts, and they say things with people not even, you know, they say things about UW. Up to this day, they have not been able to present a plan to the people. These are not about men that want to do better by the country. These are men that protecting their turf. This is a mafia organization that has taken over our country.
Yes, thank you for that. I think we have Zed Lloyd with us. I know you want to make a contribution to the discussion, so go ahead, please.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Is my mic good enough? Peace,
yes, we can hear you.
Well, first time on your platform. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure. Honorables, listeners, friends. I want to touch the issue of independence a bit. You guys mind if I shift from where you are on that?
Yeah, just for a minute, because we want to stay on the topic.
All right. So, yeah, so go ahead and deal with the topic. I'm listening. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Sounds good. So let's go back to the Facebook Live comments, and then we're going to wind down the program in just a little bit. So, Zed, you can make the contribution that you would like to make at that point. Let me just go ahead and mute your mic for 1 minute as we take the comments from Facebook. Dorian Charles, people getting in the list without being, the comments are going by so quickly. I think I just lost that comment. So let's go back to the top. People getting on the list without being qualified is something I have firsthand knowledge about. I know what happened to someone that visited Dominica in 2014. Adelaide Joseph, I am not registered in Dominica and I have been out of the country for almost 35 years. I better not be on the list. Well, Adelaide, I would encourage you to make sure that is the case. Adelaide Paul, an election with no manifesto, no plans, just simply want to stay in power without any progressive plans for the people. Jefferson Winston, Skerritt has no respect for the courts. How can a man in the government can disrespect the ruling of the highest court of the region and call an election? How can the people sit down and look? Jerry over there on YouTube, Rosa North, Funkole, the voting list of the last election was out of viewing for the last day for voting, which had some people confused, not knowing where their names were to vote. Irvin Charles, Claudius, that's why we cannot remove these criminals from office. by the ballot, it take another constitutional coup wash brigade to eradicate them. So guys, thank you so much for your contribution. So Zed, let me come over to you so you can make your contribution because we're getting ready to wind down in a little while.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to touch the independent conversation a little bit because I think there's some dimensions of it that need to be addressed. I want to look at the independence thing as something that from where it started to where it's ending. I think the premise, the starting premise, was a revolutionary premise. I think given the dimensions that we were facing, the legalities, the lawyers and their perspectives, I think the idea of holding that initial state as an independent movement, I thought that was awesome. And then you come into the transition where independent candidates now think of themselves as candidates. And I understand that conversation. But to me, if your first step was a revolutionary step, then your second step should be, well, I am contesting this election to ensure that if I get in there is that we have electoral reform, we bring closure to this government, and we transition to a process where we can have free and fair elections and everybody get a fair chance to run an election. But the conversation I'm hearing now is a justification of an illegitimate election. Because remember what the illegitimacy is, the illegitimacy is not the constitution in this case, the illegitimacy is a moral illegitimacy, all it needs is conscience, and as long as you have conscience, it's a valid argument. So to come and in this perspective as an independent candidate and to be talking to me as if you have an idea of being in parliament in that full term of this election, to me, it destroys the initial revolutionary premise that the independent package is supposed to present in this situation. And so I don't know if the individual people, the independent artists really understand the whole pathology, if you wish, of what they're really dealing with. Because if you look at it, the only place an independent candidate can win really is where the UWP could win, if you really look at it. Other than if you have an independent candidate who has an independent culture, heritage, strength in that constituency because they have been developing independent leadership in that constituency, maybe like a Muta in the reserve up there or something like that, or as we saw Roosevelt Scary turning a brother into a winner in the Jellyman, who happens to have background because he's been a constituency and a collective mind in his community. But if you take a candidate that is just starting to be a candidate, present them as an independent candidate, no heritage of leadership in that constituency, there is no chance you're going to win into a constituency where the Labour Party already wins. So the arguments they're not following logical premise. So I don't think the investment that is being made now in terms and the distraction from where these independent candidates could be mobilizing for tomorrow, could be mobilizing a movement. We have a lot of heat being lost to people mobilizing to actually campaign, and not campaign on a moral construct, but campaign on the construct of trying to be an elected official, when what we should be doing is raising the moral consciousness of the nation, because that is the only thing that can really stop Roosevelt Scary, not the election. Because the election, as brother Sanford says, is already owned by Roosevelt Scary. You see? So I just want these independents to understand that in all their good intent, a lot of energy was drained from where it was supposed to be at because of that diversion, and because of the fact that the diversion became misguided when people took it to seem to mean in a manner as if they want to legitimize the election while claiming to be an independent candidate. You cannot be an independent candidate in this argument, and your argument is to give legitimacy to this election. So I just wanted us to get some understanding to that argument and to see how, where it is. And sometimes where even revolutionary things, if they don't come from good premise and proper philosophical consciousness, even they themselves can lose sight of that bigger picture that we're talking about.
Yes, thank
That's
you.
all I
Thank
wanted
you.
to say. Miss.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Zed, for your contribution. Now, Claudius, let me come back to you for a minute, and then I want to make sure we get all the final thoughts before we wind down this evening. But now that we have hindsight is 2020. What do you think going forward, considering the Prime Minister said that electoral reform would be within the first 100 days? What do you think the approach going forward should be to keep his feet to the fire this time around, so that this does not become yet another empty promise that he comes back, having won this election, and claim again within the first 100 days there will be electoral reform? What can be done to keep him accountable, do you think?
All right. So I am not the one who becomes very critical of evolutionary stuff, right? Like for me, the election that was called by Mr. Skerritt was calculated to cause confusion. It was evil work, and it manifested itself. And one will agree that a large proportion of the population in Dominica were confused, right? And once that exists, once that energy exists in an entire country, we can then use the moral argument that Zed is talking about, and label it as evil. So I won't be critical of the movement which started out of that confusion, which is the collaboration or the collision of opposition parties in not participating in elections. So I think it's very young. It's developing, and out of that we saw independent candidates came out as a resistance to the total dictatorship approach that Skerritt wanted. And back you, that is what he wants. He wants a total control of the country. And some people decide, okay, we are not going to give you that. And we can see that is tormenting him in some of his talks and his strategies in that election. He's totally lost. We could see that. So for me, I like what Zid is saying, but I would approach it from a more optimistic way. Some of these candidates will win the election. Some will cause some serious shifting. Like, for example, in the Saliba constituency, Miss Muta is causing some serious shifting, and anything can come out of that constituency. I think the idea now is to keep the coalition going and be more strategic in allowing the energies of the independent candidate to integrate into the movement that will ensure that Mr. Skerritt is held accountable for this election. Meaning, whether we have to hit the streets, whether we have to, take him out by all means necessary, that we can harness the energies of all these independent candidates, because the energy is one of resisting Roosevelt Skerritt. I do not think I would go as far as saying is to legitimize Roosevelt Skerritt. I personally believe, from understanding and seeing the energy from these independent candidates, is a resistance to a total dictatorship. So we need to harness that energy, and that energy is what will keep, as you asked the question, keep his feet to the fire. Mr. Skerritt will not go on beyond 2 years in government if we harness the energy of that movement. And we can see it, we will see it after the election. And if we are strategic, we don't necessarily have to speak of it right here now. But all I will say is that we will see the energy after the election. It will evolve, it will show its face. And it's that energy we have to harness and ensure that this election, which is illegitimate on a moral ground, becomes what it is. It is quashed, and electoral reform and a new day will be born in Dominica. But it needs us to unite in messaging and purpose. We cannot be critical of people who step forward in a democracy to resist the formation of a dictatorship and exclude them from the conversation. We need to allow them to produce what they ought to produce, and then gather that energy into that collision. So there's a lot to come. I'm optimistic. There's a lot to be harnessed. There's a lot to be harvested in that process. And I think Mr. Skerritt understands that. I believe he understands the few days and months after the election. And we just have to be vigilant, keep our eyes open, and it will unfold. I believe there's a new awakening in Dominica, and we have to harness it together. So brother said, I believe we need to bring the energies together, think of it from various perspectives, and I think it will unfold in a very successful way.
Yeah, I think you got a little distorted towards the end, but I think we got the gist of what you were trying to say. So Zed, let me take a couple of comments real quick, and then I
Yeah.
will come over to you for some final thoughts. Nep says double voting on dead electoral members, the inflation of the electoral institutions, the infiltration of the electoral institutions and voter manipulation is widespread in Dominica's electoral process. When Skerrit said that no one can win against Labour, he was not wrong. This is why he is running away from the electoral reform with the sham elections. Jefferson Winston, it's just a shame Skerrit not put our politics down a drain. Everything is destroyed by this man and his old deeds. Ralph Hood Matthew, but he said that before he is a rogue, he is not accountable. Avril Bertrand has to be a coordinated effort with all opposition parties. It cannot be fractured or divided. Niambi Mate, John, great to see you. The sound is off. Thank you for letting me know, Niambi. I think Claudius got a little muffled at the end. Marshall, why are members of the Electoral Commission not who represent the nation saying nothing about elections in reference to their task? Nazidia, sorry if I mispronounced that. Very good point, Mr. Sanford. Independent candidates, people are awakening, and hopefully we can keep that energy beyond December 6th. Zed, you wanted to make a contribution?
Yeah. I think one of the things that Brother Sanford and others need to understand, beyond December 6th, this is not simply an electoral argument anymore. You know, the thing is, Dominica is in a sense of emergency on many issues other than election. This is a sense of emergency, financially, economically, sociologically, even spiritually. It's in a sense of emergency. So I'm kind of a little bit worried, as if if we kind of focus the movement simply on the idea of, well, we have to wait on Roosevelt Skerrit for electoral reform. I think what Roosevelt Skerrit has done and the urgency in our nation at this point in time, our argument should not be on an argument of waiting on Roosevelt Skerrit's time anymore. I think we, the citizens, for us to solve Dominica, we have to be the ones that forces Roosevelt Skerrit to act. And I think it is very critical for us to embrace that kind of understanding. Otherwise, you see this energy and this momentum and this build-up. We've had build-ups over these last 10, 12 years, and every time we build them up, we never utilize the momentum. Politics is a thing, man. When you lose momentum, it is hard to build it back up. Very hard. And so I just want us to be cognizant of that. We have to go for that jugular on this move, brothers and sisters. We have to go for it. We have to go for that jugular peacefully, but we have to go for it. One love.
My mic was muted. My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Sanford, Mr. Lloyd, Dr. Fontaine, Mr. Ito, who popped in for a little bit, Za Emmanuel, who kept trying to come in but was unsuccessful. I want to thank you for being here, for joining us for Dominica's Electoral Reform Coalition virtual rally, and for the hundreds who contributed by making a comment, a question to the program. I am Simone Matthew. Thank you for being a part of the program. Don't forget to follow Push Past 10 as well as Q95 FM radio to keep up to date on the elections, as well as everything else that is directed at moving Dominica and the rest of the Caribbean region forward. Don't forget the major rally tomorrow, Monday, December 5th in Lagos. And we are looking forward to your contributions so we can have busloads of Dominicans come from far and wide to be a part of that rally tomorrow. So again, the website, www.nidclf.org for your donations. If you would like to make a donation, if you want to contribute to the efforts to the electoral reform process with the rally tomorrow. So, guys, do you have any final words as we wind down for the evening? Mr. Sanford, you want to go first? Let's see if your mic is working.
Yeah, so I'd just
Yes.
like to say thank you for the opportunity. The fight is on, and I would like to invite, all the brothers and sisters around the country who are listening here tonight to make it out tomorrow. We need to show solidarity. We need to show the energy. We need to show the urgency of what is going on in Dominica. It's not easy. It's not going to be easy. And I have the tendency to think beyond things, and we may be surprised at what Mr. Byron is coming in with electoral reform, what he has recommended, and that may be the straw that breaks the camel back. So I think we need to keep the energy going, keep the momentum, and I look forward to seeing a lot of people tomorrow in that gathering. Thank you very much for the
Yes.
opportunity.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. Zed Lloyd?
Well, boy, first of all, I remember 2019, what's your name, sister?
Simone?
Simone. I remember 2019, I felt really deflated. I was like, and that morning after Salisbury, and I saw Lennox and Joshua in the studio on Q95, and they were going to election. And I felt so dejected. I hated the UWP that morning. And I'm happy, man, that it's 2022, and I feel like I can say, you know what? I love the UWP for its stance on this election. I am happy that the party has grown some balls, to say this is what we're going to do and we're going to stand by it. I know some people might want it to be more militaristic, and after all the years of frustration, but I want to tell the people that struggle sometimes. If you keep hitting the hammer and hitting the hammer and the hammer is not going through, you're too resistive. You have to have a different kind of elasticity. You have to change tactic. I like the idea of the prayer thing tomorrow. I like the idea of the candles. I like the idea because government is labeling everything that we're trying to do as violent and as disruptive and as everything. And part of our winning has to be to contradict their narrative. And there's no better way to contradict narrative than with action. So I applaud the movement. I applaud my brother Hotel from the DFP, even without any sort of national, just that posture of community and coalition and unity. All the others, the bossos, the different, it's a good vibes. It's a good vibes. I'm just calling upon the people tomorrow. Come out. Come with your candle. Come and light your candle and come. Let us just light up Roseau. Dominica have too much darkness on it right now. Too much darkness. Let's bring some light into the place. Let's go there in a sizing of that. When these cameras and these phones and social media see, they realize that, you know what? There's thousands of Dominicans that are really worried about the electoral process. That's all we have to do tomorrow night. And the victory is ours.
Yes. Thank you very much, Zed. And thank you to our Q95 listeners. Thank you to Mr. G and the Q95 team for allowing us to broadcast on Q95 Radio. And of course, thank you to our Facebook and YouTube audience for joining us. And don't forget, for all your promotional and hosting needs, you can reach me at pushpast10@gmail.com. So that is pushpast10@gmail.com. Always a pleasure being here with you as we continue to move Dominica and the Caribbean region forward. So with that, we say good evening. Have a great night. Don't forget the major rally and candlelight vigil tomorrow in Dominica, December 5th. Tomorrow, Monday, December 5th. So we look forward to having you participate in one way or the other. And with that, we bid you good night and thank you for joining us.